Yes, the hardest question is pronounce your name.
It's Aysegul.
Oh, like icicle.
So every time I say it, people come up with different things. Aysegul is the kids usually come up with, but icicle, I find it a little cold, but yeah, we can go with that.
This episode is sponsored by Hired.com. Every week on Hired, they run an auction where over 1,000 tech companies in San Francisco, New York, and LA bid on JavaScript developers, providing them with the salary and equity up front. The average JavaScript developer gets an average of 5 to 15 introductory offers and an average salary of over $130,000 a year. Users can either accept an offer and go right into interviewing with the company or deny them without any continuing obligations. It's totally free for users, and when you're hired, they also give you a $2,000 signing bonus as a thank you for using them. But if you use the Adventures in Angular link, you'll get a $4,000 bonus instead. Finally, if you're not looking for a job but know someone who is, you can refer them to Hired and get a $1,337 bonus if they accept a job. Go sign up at hired.com/adventures in Angular. Ready to master Angular? Oasis Digital offers Angular Bootcamp, a 3-day in-person workshop class for individuals or teams. Bring us to your site or send developers to our classes in St. Louis or San Francisco, angularbootcamp.com. This episode is sponsored by Wijmo5, a brand new generation of JavaScript controls. A pretty amazing line of HTML5 and JavaScript products for enterprise application development in that Wijmo5 leverages ECMAScript 5 and each control ships with AngularJS directives. Check out the faster, lighter, and more mobile Wijmo 5. This episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the provider I use to host all of my creations. All the shows are hosted there, along with any other projects I come up with. Their user interface is simple and easy to use, their support is excellent, and their VPSs are backed on solid-state drives and are fast and responsive. Check them out at DigitalOcean.com. If you use the code AngularAdventures, you'll get a $10 credit. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 58 of the Adventures in Angular show. This week on our panel we have Lucas Rubelkey.
Hello.
Ward Bell.
Hello there.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. Quick reminder, go check out AngularRemoteConf.com. We also have a special guest this week, and that's Aysegul. I didn't ask how to say your last name.
Don't mess it up.
Yonet.
Yes, that's correct. Aysegul.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Aysegul Yonet, and I'm a senior software engineer, and I work with this amazing organization called Any Cannons, which teaches human trafficking survivors how to code. And I do work a lot with D3 and Angular.
Awesome. I love D3. I've used it on a couple of projects. It just does awesome stuff. Do you want to give a quick overview about what D3 is and what it can be used for?
Sure. So D3 stands for Data-Driven Documents. So it allows you to bind the data to your DOM elements and operate over your DOM elements using that data. So many people think of it as a visualization library, but it's actually a way of working with the DOM, and there is no plug and play charts like Google Charts. So you have to build everything from scratch, and you have to define all of your charts. But it also enables you to create something from scratch that is amazing looking, and it's very flexible.
Yeah, one other thing that I noticed when I was working with it was that on, say, one chart, I could select a segment of data, and then it would update all of the other charts to show just that segment of data, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, possibilities are endless.
Yep. And it's also really, pulling in your data source is like the easiest part. The rest of it's, okay, how big do I want this? What colors do I want in it? How do I, make it look the way I want? I thought it was really awesome. And all of the options you have are just so powerful.
Mm-hmm. So with D3, you're basically working with HTML, CSS, and SVG, and you can do anything that you want. And with the things that you're very familiar with, it only gives you some methods to use along the way. Like, as you said, loading external data is very easy, and it has a lot of array manipulation methods as well.
Can we back up a little bit? Because I'm really curious about the relationship between D3 and the company you work for and the people you're working with. And I know you have a long and interesting background of combining computing with social interests. So I hope you don't mind. I'd love to go back because, like, for example, when last we talked, you actually got your start in San Quentin, didn't you?
Teaching-wise?
Yeah. I don't mean that you were locked up there.
I could have been. Well, actually, I was teaching for Girl Develop It, Black Girls Code, and Women Who Code. And I've been running my own Women Who Code meetups for the last 2 years. And along the way, Hack Reactor, which is a bootcamp based in San Francisco with the Last Mile organization, which works with the San Quentin prison, we decided to have a bootcamp inside the prison. So, that gave me a great experience before I dive into any Cannon's work.
And so the people that you're teaching, they know anything about computing, or you're giving them their first taste of it?
Some of them, well, I would say most of them. I mean, we definitely had some students who never used a mouse before because they've been there for a long time. So average is, I think, 13, 14, 15 years, something like that. So these are the people who are towards the end of their time in prison. So they will be out very soon. So we want to give them a chance to survive out there. But we had a few engineers, mechanical engineer, I think one of them was a mechanical engineer. But on the other hand, no matter how much familiarity they had at the time, that was long, long time ago. So I find myself sometimes explaining what Google is, what YouTube is. Never explain what Skype is, but it will be a surprise for them when they get out.
These are all surprises for me too. So, I mean, the technologies are moving so fast. So I hear you, but they're these folks are highly motivated because this is an opportunity to come out and actually find work. We hope, I think, that the computing trades are more receptive to people who have had this kind of a background.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I've never seen any other group of people that I teach being that motivated. So we talked to around 300 people to select from inside the prison, and only 20-something was selected to participate in this program. And they're there every morning, 6:30 in the morning, and then they go into afternoon. And they tell me, I go back to my cell and if I haven't solved this problem, I kept thinking about it and I can't wait to come back and solve it.
That sounds like a tech pro. What about, and so that's that group. Now the women that you're, how do you meet the women that you're helping? You're teaching?
Yeah. So, that's one of the challenges that we have at AiA Cannons that's been really hard because there are some, housing around Bay Area that gives a place to stay to some of the survivors right after they were discovered, I would say. Uh-huh. But we have a lot of security issues. So in order for us to go in and meet those people, we have to go through 3-day workshop, full day workshop, and then all these security checks. So they're paying so much attention to, keep them secure. But we have all these organizations that are willing to work with us. They are very excited about giving the survivors a chance to learn and have their own businesses.
Right. And you're teaching these folks D3?
No, not just D3. This is a whole program for teaching them any tech skill. This could be, they might end up doing QA stuff and mostly front-end engineering. And hopefully in the future, we will add some mobile development as well to our curriculum.
I see. So you're teaching them a wide range of sort of web development skills.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So sorry for that bypass, but it's fascinating.
No,
it's fascinating
really
what
interesting.
You do. And I know that many of I won't speak for any of our listeners, but I can speak for myself in saying that, there's part of me that's really looking for these opportunities to do that kind of thing. So that's an inspiration. So with that, let's get back to your tech chops, which I know are quite good. And tell us then how D3 fits into what you're doing and what your life is.
Mm-hmm. So I worked in different places creating analytic tools mostly. So everyone has the data problem these days. So dashboards are useful for almost every company. So I've been creating a lot of dashboards and a lot of searching and filtering tools using D3 and Angular together.
So and the D3 is for visualization of the data. So is it sort of classic graphs and pie charts, or are you doing very interestingly weird things?
The most very interestingly weird thing I would say I did on a professional environment is probably the maps, because maps are pretty interesting. But I did do other visualizations using 3JS, which is the 3D visualization library as well.
Tell us about the maps, but tell us about that other thing too. So the maps thing would be like, how do I put pins on a map based on data, or what kind of mapping things are you doing with D3?
So D3 mostly works with SVG. So there are a few things that you can do. You can definitely put a map and then put some pins on top. But also you are able to get any kind of border data from open source government websites for cities or neighborhoods or the whole world, if you like. Mm-hmm. And then you're able to render it the way you like it. And then on top of it, you can make heat maps or anything you can imagine. So it's definitely different than what Google Maps is doing. It's not the tiles most of the time. You're working with actual border data. There's
a gallery of examples, and I just put the link into the chat room for the show notes. But you can get on there and you can kind of look. So there are a few of them in there with maps. So one of them is sort of a heat map. It's chloropleth. And so it's unemployment rates across the country at different rates and scales. And it shows you all of the different styling that you put in there and the actual D3 code that it takes to put it together. So that's one example where it breaks things down and shows you, sort of by county or by area what those are. And there's another one that's force-directed states. And, if you grab one of the states and yank it around, then it does some SVG stuff, and that's kind of fun. But, there are all kinds of things that you can do with it. And if you want some examples, there are all kinds of charts and bubble graphs and things that will give you ideas of what you can do with D3.
Okay, so I'm going to continue to be naive. So I'm imagining then that if I'm writing an application, like maybe an Angular application, I might be using the Angular application to sort of get the criteria for selecting some data. Then I would have it go get that data, bring it down, maybe massage it a little, and then I would use D3 to render it locally in the browser. Is that approximately right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how Angular and D3 come together. Is that right?
That is true.
Yeah, one of the things that I liked about Aysegul's slides was that it showed how to create a really quick directive for a graph. And so you can build your directives so that they wrap around the D3 API, and then you can actually stick that into your code, and then you can put the information in the way you want it and have it display the graph in the way that you need it to be displayed.
Give us an example of a directive that, simple, one that one could understand on just by listening, that would do just the kind of thing that was described there.
Mm-hmm. So I want to tell you a story too.
Oh, tell us.
We love stories.
Story of working with the designers on data visualizations. So I worked at this consulting company where our designers would come up with these beautiful designs months in advance, and they would, of course, use some fake data to design their visualizations. So if we have data points that are vastly different than each other, we would have some edge cases that would look the actual graphs totally different than what the designer had in mind. So this was a common problem that we had all the time. So it made it really hard to go back and forward with the designers. So I think what Angular directives are making our life very easy in a way is that we can work with the designers in a much better way. So I create these directives. So I have my own tags for the directives, which is like, let's say, bar charts or line chart. Then any designer could take that and then apply the data to it, use very declaratively using the HTML attributes, and then can see it for themselves, like how it looks, and can do necessary adjustments. So the part that I love about using directives with D3 is that I can define every graph in a separate directive, bar graph in one, line graph in another one, map in another one, and then anyone can use it anywhere in their application. That way I'm creating a new dictionary of graphs and making it easy to use.
So then you just tell the designer, if they're a designer that's actually writing HTML, just put a bar graph tag in here with these attributes and it'll just magically work.
Yes. and then they can see, and they can bind different kinds of data, which will be in my controller, and see if that works for that particular graph. In a way, it allows you to have your own prototyping tool.
That's really slick. Mm-hmm. So is there a convenient collection of these directives somewhere that I could just pull into a project if I don't want to write them for myself?
Great question. So there's one good open source project that's called Angular AiA D3. So it has a bunch of graphs, from some line graphs and to bar charts and stuff. And it is really cool. But still, it's limited. So you can start from there, and then when you need it, you can add more yourself. And actually, I've learned a lot from reading that code as well, and I was actually inspired by it. So it also allows you to declaratively decide on the color scheme or the data or what have you. So that's the way I like to create my directives myself too.
So the designer's role is to figure out the page and decide, okay, I want a bar graph here and a chart there, or like if you push this button, it switches from bar graph to pie chart, or that kind of thing. And also to provide certain flexibility and styling by virtue of passing attributes to these widgets.
Yes, true.
Then you, as a directive developer, are actually coming up with these new tags, right? These new semantic tags representing different thoughts. And you're designing those, or is that
exactly
right?
And I'm giving all these options. I'm able to give all these options of attributes, which then I can take on my directive and use it. And I can also give like default values. And it's very easy to do with the directives. And I love that about working with Angular.
And so then you're sort of having your conversation with the designer, and they say, "Boy, I wish there was this visualization that was like this with these options. Aysegul, can you do that for me?" And you say, "Sure, I'll just modify the directive to pass the right stuff through to D3." Is that how the conversation goes?
That's true. And for the next project, I have that visualization already. It's ready to go, and I can just use that as well.
Now, do you tend to create very semantically specific kinds of visualizations? Like instead of just saying pie chart, it's unemployment pie chart, that kind of thing? Or is it more each time piecing things that are more general purpose?
So what I like to do is create general purpose charts, and then I can use that for any projects that I like, so I won't repeat myself. So one other really cool thing that you can do with Angular is also give some accessor functions to your attributes on your HTML so that you can define those functions in your controller. So no matter what the structure of the data is, you're still free to use the same directives the way that you use in any simple data structure. But the way you access to the particular data points in that particular data structure is through the accessor functions, which you define in your controller. Does that make sense?
Is it the controller in the director, or is it the controller outside of the directive? I'm kind of...
It doesn't have to be inside. I mean, you can definitely have outside of it. And I usually do have outside of it.
So like the view model, it's binding, and there's some kind of binding to the view model that is driving the outer HTML that has your little component in it, and that's how it communicates? Like the outside view model is the thing that's responsible for getting the data and stuff like that. And then it makes that available through exposing a property, which then on the views HTML, you bind to one of the properties of your widget.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to draw these things in the air orally, but, but I think I'm getting the scheme.
Great.
Yeah, that works.
I think we got a pretty good foot bone connects to the leg bone, connects to the hip bone.
Right. That was my problem.
So I'm looking at a Plunk right now, and I linked it in so we could probably put it in the show notes, but it's pretty neat. So it has a chart that's you're actually doing an ng repeat. Mm-hmm. And so just by actually declaring your options in the controller, you have basically the configuration is actually outside of the directive, and then you're passing it in. But then you're also generating just the straight up data set, which is just a basic JavaScript function. And so, the code actually reads really nice in the HTML because you're just saying, take the data in this data set, loop over it, and then just go ahead and instantiate this D3 directive with this options. And then I could just play with the options as much as I want to basically mix to taste. And so it just reads like a regular Angular app, which is pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. How beautiful is that?
It's gorgeous.
All kinds of shapes and stuff.
Yeah.
Very colorful, too. So I have a friend that was looking for a good graphing library, and I turned him on to D3. What other uses do you see for something like this as far as, people saying, I need to do X, or I have a problem visualizing Y, so D3 sounds like a good option?
So anything that you are doing like basic stuff like the bar charts and line graph, it's very easy to find some tools like the Google Charts and AiA D3 is great and easier to use. But anything else that you want to do more specific and more interesting will need to start from scratch with D3. So I'm pasting in great article I recently found. It's explaining the machine learning algorithms, and I can't read the article myself because the visualizations are so beautiful. I get stuck at looking at them. So I don't know if you can see it, but while you're reading through the article, while you're scrolling down, a visualization on the side of it is happening while you're doing it. And it's such a great storytelling, I would say.
I do have to say that that's a big thing that I think we often forget in our code as we look at the data, and then we're saying these data represent this thing, and so I want to communicate it well. But in articles like this, where you have these visualizations that are beautiful and communicate so clearly what you're looking at, the thing that's interesting is that they tell a story. Mm-hmm. And, they're saying, look, these pieces of data do this, and then they do that. And it's more than just an illustration of the data, but it actually communicates the points as you step through it and gives you this, like I said, this story, this narrative. We took this data and then we applied these thought processes to it. And then, we sorted it these other ways, and then we added these algorithms to it. And
all I can say is, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm writing too many to-do apps. This is embarrassing. Some of this stuff would just blow your mind watching it. And it's all being rendered in real time in the browser. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just wouldn't have believed you could do this.
Yeah. One of the applications that I've done this for is building dashboards for businesses, especially if they're doing like lean startup, where they have a couple of metrics that they're measuring as they do experiments to see whether or not they're paying off. And by having that there and having time data and cohort data and things like that, it tells them that story. So it's these groups of people that signed up at different times, or overall users, they're liking this and they're not liking that, and they're clicking this and they're using the app this way. And so you get kind of this overall narrative again of how people are using the application, which is very valuable to those businesses. Our experiment is going this way, and over time it seems to mature this way. I mean, that's the real power of these different visualizations, is that it puts into terms that aren't just numbers, but it gives you an intuitive feel as things trend upward or downward or group together, how different data or how different users in this case behave.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
So
I'll never, I don't know. Maybe I should just give up my job.
So what's the most mind-blowing thing that you've seen or done with D3?
Unfortunately, I haven't done anything mind-blowing. I think there are so many mind-blowing things out there. I use D3 doing work stuff most of the time. So the data itself was challenging, and the challenge was to find a meaningful way of visualizing things, but the visualizations itself weren't that challenging. But I was put to shame also at the San Quentin prison recently. So their D3 sprints, the time period that they learned D3, they were also visualizing some sorting algorithms like merge sort, bubble sort, and all of them. And one of the students there did all of it at once and then went ahead and started visualizing the prison data because that's the only data that he has access to. And I was so embarrassed because it was so beautiful, so nice, and I was super impressed with what they did.
All you can do is applaud it.
Yep.
True.
You taught it real well. That's what that means.
That's what that means. And that it also means that that person, having discovered that for him or herself, has confidence to go out into the world. They can wow somebody else. And that's rewarding. So what's the, all right, you told us all, we're sitting here glassy-eyed in amazement. There's got to be something wrong in here. What's this? Where's the fish that stinks? What's wrong?
Anyone want to answer this question for me? I think there's thank
it's
you,
hard.
Lucas.
It's really hard to learn.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Is it? Because I'm looking at this thing and saying, wow, I should be able to do this. I'm looking at this amazing stuff as the page scrolls, and I say,
Yeah.
I can tell you that a lot of times for the bar charts or graph charts, I'll go look at one of their examples and I'll just copy and paste the code, and then I'll start fiddling with it to get it where I want. But there's a lot in there. There are a lot of capabilities in there.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the learning curve, but depending on what your use case is, you may only need one little feature, and I didn't find that those were necessarily too tricky to pick up.
Mm-hmm. True. So there are a few basic concepts that you need to understand. One of them is the selections with D3. So basically, each time you're selecting some DOM elements and you're doing some operations over that DOM elements, and then you're returning that selection back. And sometimes you add to that selection, and that's when things get a little bit confusing. People tend to think they have a different kind of selection when they have appended some data to this new selection that they're operating on. So I feel like so many people get confused there and give up there. Once you get the selection part clear, I think the rest of it is just looking at the documentation and finding the useful methods that you need to use. And some of them are like for creating axes or manipulating your data, or they have some layouts as well for example, tree graphs and things like that. I think that part is much easier to figure out once you get over the selection part. But I feel like people don't realize that they're getting hung up on the selection part, and they think that they know what they're operating on. And that's where things get really confusing.
Is it hard to debug?
To be able to debug, though, you still have to realize that you're operating on the selection, right? And so many people just assume that they have the right selection, and they don't think about just constantly logging that selection and see what they're operating on. And other than that, it's just JavaScript, and you have all the tools that you need in your console.
That's a great tip. I always just inspected it visually and then tried to make it look better.
Yeah. But it's so much fun, but it takes time. I mean, you have to define every single thing. I mean, it's great that you have an axes function that defines, you can give scales and stuff like that and then define it. But once your data changes, you have to actually change the formatting of your ticks and stuff like that. So everything is a manual thing. So you actually have to think through the problem, and it takes time.
So I'm looking at this Wonder page, and there are all these clever animations. Does D3 have a built-in animation library?
Yes. So it has some transition methods. So basically you define before transition and after transition, and then you can define delays and durations and everything else. And it's really cool. So the D3 animations don't work very well with React as far as I know, but it works great with Angular, and there's no problem with that. And that was one of the reasons that I chose to work with Angular over and over.
There's I'm looking at the Wonder page, and there's just some amazing things with dots moving up and down. Do you know how they're doing that?
So it's basic SVG transitions. So you're defining where it should be before, and depending on your new data, you defined a different place. For example, go from this data point to the second data point. So you have access to the data, and you are able to define those functions that will define the second upcoming placement of your dots. And you're able to move them with like group elements using the regular SVG element methods. It's pretty easy, actually.
Really?
The transition part, yes.
Yeah, because it's pretty stunning to look at. What am I looking at in a learning curve here? If I wanted to pick this up, what should I realistically expect?
Mm-hmm.
And where do I go? Do I come to you?
So there are really cool resources out there. So Lucas mentioned the 150-page Mark Bossack documentation, and it's really hard to read those things. But there are really cool videos about the basics. Tonight we will be recording a D3 meetup at SFHTML5, and it will be available online. And in the Bay Area, there is a Bay Area D3 meetup group, and they do have a YouTube page where you can watch their videos, and they do go over the basics all the time. And start playing with it, and I'll be here to answer any of your questions, Mark.
I'm so lucky to live in the Bay Area.
Yes, we're all lucky.
All right, anything else we should cover before we do picks?
Well, there's the obligatory question. No, I'm not even going to ask whether you've thought at all about D3 intersecting Angular 2 or even heard anything about it. But I just did ask the question.
That was actually my talk at Angular U and NG Vegas. There's no recording at Angular U, but it's basically the same thing. So the way I was thinking about it with Angular 1 is creating directives and working with controllers and the view, and it totally applies to Angular 2, right? And it kind of makes it even clearer to have components.
So you see a fairly straightforward transition from the kinds of directives that you've been writing for Angular 1 to Angular 2 components.
I do. Actually, we do talk about it there's a video about it on NG Vegas, with Patrick and I did. So.
Oh, yeah. I think I even remember that one. We should make sure we include that link for people.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Wow. All right. Mind blown. Time for picks.
All right. Let's do picks. Lucas, do you have some picks for us?
I have 2 picks. The first pick is I've really been enjoying Starbucks mango black tea lemonade. I've actually been cutting out energy drinks, carbonated energy drinks out of my diet. This has filled a wonderful hole in my soul where Red Bull once lived. And my next pick is actually a book that I bought for my son, and it's called Rosie Revere, Engineer, and it's by Andrea Beatty, I believe. And it's just a really clever kid's book, but it's about this girl who is an engineer, but she's kind of afraid, and so there's kind of a life lesson in there, and it's pretty cool. I also recommend the companion book called Iggy Peck, Architect. They are fantastic.
All right. Ward, what are your picks?
Oh, sorry. I got to pass this week. It's been a rough week.
Yeah, he was looking at those animated charts and mind went blank.
Mind went blank.
I know how that goes sometimes. I'm just going to do a quick shout out for Angular Remote Conf. If you want a discount, you can get it. It's Adventure or Adventures. I had some confusion over that, for 25% off. And prices just went up because early bird ended yesterday as we record this. But you can still get tickets. You can also get tickets for your users group. So if you have a place for everybody to get together and watch, it'll be the 24th through the 26th of September from 12 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I get that that's during the workday, but it seemed like most people preferred it that way. So I'll shout that out. I've also got this guilty pleasure. I've been watching Orphan Black. I've watched all of season 1 and a few episodes of season 2, and it's great. So yeah, it's a BBC America show, which means that it's BBC seasons instead of American seasons. So each season's like 10 episodes long. Pretty intense show, but a lot of fun. And finally, I'm also going to shout out another thing that I've been doing lately. I've pulled together co-working Thursdays. So if you work from home or work remotely, we just meet at the local cafe. Usually there are between 3 and 6 people there right now. We've been doing it for about 2 months. But it's been a really great way to just get together and interact with people who work from home and don't get a lot of chances to interact with other folks who are professionals like them. So if you're looking
how does that work, Chuck? Explain how that works.
So I set up
in other words, you're doing this in Utah, but I'm in the Bay Area. What is it in general?
So I set up a meetup group, and then I send an email. Actually, one of the other guys sends an email out to the users group. So he sends it to the local Ruby group, JavaScript group, and Linux group. And I'm looking at reaching out to the Python group and the Go group and the Angular group and stuff like that. But anyway, so what we do is we show up, We're just there from 10 to 4. So we just grab a table at the restaurant and we spend the time alternating between chatting with each other and getting work done. And
eating delicious food. Just admit it.
Yes.
That sounds great. And this is, so it's just totally informal. You just say, hey, we're getting
together
this restaurant and we're getting together and people show, whoever shows.
Yeah. Cause I work from home and I get some social interaction from doing the podcast. I talk to you guys and I talk to the folks over on the other shows, but it's nice to get some FaceTime with real people, and you're real people, but I don't see you face to face. And even over the webcam, it's just not the same.
Well, I love that idea because more and more of us are working remotely and want to be able to have that social interaction. And it also sounds like a great way to meet, to sort of break the boundary, the bubble of your technology that you're currently working in.
Yeah, so we have a couple of Rails developers that come. We have a Node.js developer that shows, and he's doing Node and Ember, I think. And then, some of the other developers are doing various things. We also have a construction project manager that shows up every Thursday that found the group on meetup.com. And she just, she wants that kind of interaction too. And so it's just a really convenient way for her to show up and meet people, even though she's not a high-tech person.
How do you title this meetup so that people recognize it as something they might want to come to?
We just call it Co-working Thursdays, and people know we're there every Thursday.
Nice.
So that's just an idea that came out that I really liked. It came out of an episode of Freelancer Show where we talked to Alex Hillman about co-working spaces. And I basically asked him, what do I do if I don't know if I have enough people to open a co-working space? And he threw that idea out there, and I love it because there's almost literally nothing I have to do to make it go ahead. I just have to let people know every week that they can still come and hang out. So.
And the price of entry is unlike a co-working site where you're signing up for a membership and so it's a financial commitment. This is this is freeform. Yeah, nice.
Yep. And we do it at Paradise Bakery, which is owned by Panera Bread, if they have those where you're at. And so we just get one of the long tables that seats like 8 people. And usually there are 3 of us that bring power strips, and so there's plenty of power for everybody, and it just works out nicely.
Great tip.
So anyway, that's my pick. Aysegul, what are your picks?
So for a newsletter, Dashing D3JS is where I get most of my news, and it's such a great resource, and it delivers to your inbox, and I love it. I strongly recommend it. And I was inspired by your TV series, and the Bletchley Circle is one of my favorite recently. It is about the story in the Second World War at the Bletchley Park, ladies solving some code. So it's pretty fun.
They were the computers of the day.
Yes,
they were known as computers. They were human beings. Computers were humans first.
Yeah.
It's a great show.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. This has been really fun. If people want to follow up with Annie's Cannons or with you or with D3 or anything that you're working with or on, what do they do?
You can go to anniecannons.com to get more information and to see how you can contribute too. We're accepting hardware donations at the moment. If your company is getting rid of your old computers, just let us know. And Uber graciously donated their space. We will have a classroom and an office space at Uber, but we do need some computers to work on. And you can tweet at me at Aysegul Yonet. I'll put the link down. And I will also be teaching a full day D3 workshop next month, early next month, and I will give you 20% off for that and include it on the links.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for sharing my passion for D3.
Oh, you're welcome. I love it. I probably talk too much. Should have let you talk more, but...
No, I felt I did.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. Hosting and bandwidth provided by the Blue Box Group. Check them out at bluebox.net. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more. Do you want to have conversations with the Adventures in Angular crew and their guests? Do you want to support the show? Now you can. Go to adventuresinangular.com/forum and sign up today.